Let me begin by congratulating these young people here. The spirit with which you have run your own convocation is remarkable. It's very clear, as you notice in other schools and convocations, that the students are made to do something very precise. Of course, wearing gowns, which I believe you chose to do, you weren't asked to do, but thereafter you just taken over. And that's the way you're going to carry on life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Anil, for giving me the privilege to speak to the young students and their parents and your guests here today. About 5 years ago, I was at a large gathering of students and their teachers. This was in Cleveland, Ohio, where PRIME, which is an organization called Principles for Responsible Management Education, it's an adjunct of the United Nations Global Compact, had gathered students and teachers from about 100 business schools across the world. And we were hearing from the students about what they wanted the world to be and what they wished to learn to enable the world to be that. And what they had hoped to have got from their schools or hoped to get from their schools, because some had graduated and some were in school and to graduate. And I remember just one statement which summarized what was heard from the hundreds there, as well as several thousand who were polled and consulted on the internet, even as we were there. And this person said, this young woman from somewhere in the world, she said, and she was graduating, like you are, from a business school, she said, profits is easy, changing the world is hard. As I came up the staircase, I saw the poster which Soil has put up above of Bill Gates, a man who helped to make billions and now is spending some of those billions. And I'm sure Bill Gates would also say that the part of making profits was easier than the part that he's now engaged with, which is changing the world. The question is, what is the world we want to create? And what's the world you want to be part of? And what role will you play, what leadership role will you play to bring about the world that you wish to be part of? We have today dwelled, as we should, a lot on ourselves inside ourselves, because that's where the spark is. We have talked about how we are together in Soil and this happy feeling. But now you're going to venture out into the world. And I want to talk to you about the world out there. There are some very big forces that are shaping the world out there, forces which weren't there actually, or certainly hadn't come together when I was growing up, or even when Anil, who's a bit younger than me, haven't grown up completely yet, Anil, is growing up. But there are new forces, and they are the forces of the world which you are going to be much more a part of, and more importantly, responsible to shape. The first force, which is a force been going on for a long, long time, hundreds of years, gathered a lot of strength in the last 100 and more years, is the concept of economic progress, that it's the pursuit of GDP. And the progress is about how to increase the GDP. And this force is propelled much by the ideas of capitalism, as has been recognized in the last 50 years, rather than alternative ideologies. And capitalism, which is based on the notions of markets and personal property and the desire to have more for oneself and thus somehow increase the pie for everybody too. So this is one force, and as you know, it's all around. You read it all the time. You are part of it. The second force, which has grown in strength and very much more recently, that's the force of the recognition of the rights of human beings, every human being. And we saw some pictures here in Nitin's video about those who don't have what all others or many others have. And this belief that every human being has a right has been recognized as a force that we must, all of us, strengthen, in fact, is very recent, as I said. It's only in the year 2000, when at the World Economic Forum, Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the United Nations, challenged the business leaders of the world to say, and then thereafter, of course, the countries of the world who signed to the Millennium Development Goals, that every human being on the earth has a right to water, to sanitation, to education, to health, to personal safety and security. And this force of the rights of all has one angle, which is political rights, the right to be in a democracy, which we are still pushing and growing, which gathered strength much in the 89 and onwards after the Soviet Union. CCIP, what? The Soviet Union collapsed with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the number of democracies in the world, which were about 23 or 24, as measured by the United Nations before that, grew to, no, sorry, the other way around. There were 89 or so dictatorships, they said before that, and the number then came down by another 15, 20. But right now, as we notice, the Jasmine Revolution going on, and we don't know how far that will spread to. But the political rights of people through democracy we have recognized. It's the other rights, as I said, the rights of people to health, education, food, as we talk about in our country, that's growing too. What are we going to do about those rights? The third force that has grown also much more recently in the world is the prevalence or the ubiquity of information. Yes, the video also mentioned how much more information we have today given to us through various mediums than we had just 15 years ago. I mean, you've grown up in a world where you take the cell phone for granted as a kid. I'm still wondering what I would do with an iPad which I have. I can live a life without it. But apparently you wouldn't be able to live life without it. But this is the means of communication, and the internet and the media and 24/7 news channels. We have today 122 in our country. We had only 5 in 2000. Cell phones, as we say, yeah, I don't know whether the figure's right actually, which said that the number of people who don't have cell phones in the world, but that's not true of India, where we've got 750 million cell phones out there already. Maybe some of us have 2 or 3 and some don't have any. So in this world of information, people know what is happening, what others have, and in that sense, what they don't have. So when you put these 3 forces together, and they've come together, as I said, only in the last 10 years, because this force of information ubiquity wasn't there 15 years ago. This deeper recognition of the rights of all human beings was not so strong, not even 20 years ago. Of course, yes, the idea of GDP and economic growth has been there longer, but they've all come together very recently. And as they've come together, they are creating a turmoil, a world which is, as people say, a perfect storm, the coming together of 3 forces, big forces, which never had been there together before. And out of this storm, in this storm, we are hearing the voices. And what are these voices? The first voice is a voice which says, is it fair? And I'm going to cite an American professor who was a member of Bill Clinton's cabinet, Robert Reich, professor of public policy at the business school in the University of California in Berkeley. He wrote a very good book, a powerful book called Supercapitalism. It's the story of the United States, actually. He's just talking about the United States, in which he points out how conditions in the United States are such that he doesn't think it's very fair. Now, he's not a communist. He's not even a socialist. He's a capitalist. But he says that world has become a super-capitalist world. He points out in a book a little anecdote where he says 2 of his personal friends, one is Bill Gates and the other is Warren Buffett, honorable men who worked the system very fairly, no corruption there, but have today wealth which is equal to the wealth of the 100 million poorest Americans. And Robert Reich just asks the question, It's not about them, he says, it's about the system. Could this be a fair system? Well, this happens in capitalism, because in capitalism, the idea is, and it should be, that throw open opportunity to everybody, as we are doing in our country, after 91 particularly, and more so now. What happens when you throw open more opportunity is who is able to first take advantage of the greater opportunities? Those who already have something, who have the capital, who have the education, who perhaps have the access to the power, and can grow themselves faster than could others who don't have this starting material to take advantage of opportunities. So in capitalism, it has been true always and will remain true that disparities shall grow as opportunities are enlarged. Why? It's physics. It's the process of, as I say, cumulative causation. As I said, that those who have something will first be able to get more. And we hope, of course, that there will be a trickle down, and there has been a trickle down as countries have developed. But because of the consciousness of human rights, and that everybody has a right and they must have it now, a child should be able to, as a child, lead a dignified life. Now, that we can't wait for the trickle down to happen at the pace that it usually happens in the process of progress and development. The second voice we are hearing very loudly is a voice almost out of the earth, which says, is your way of progress sustainable? If we all aspire, as we do, the whole world, to live the life of a middle-class American, the goodies, and we saw pictures of the Cokes and so on, that's the life we all should have, then we know we are developed. If every Indian and every Chinese were to live the way a middle-class American lives, then, as the calculations show, we are going to need 5 Earths to support us all, and we have only one. So we have to change the concept of what is progress and how is progress brought about. What would be a measure of goodness and achievement in our lives? So I come to, in this world, which, as I say, is a world which has got a great amount of danger and risk. One is the sustainability, the other is a political risk also, as forces react. We have to be leaders in this world. Now, there are 2 functions that a leader is expected to perform. One is to give direction. We look at our leaders to say, which way shall we go? Lead us. The other function that we expect leaders to perform is to make us work together, keep us together, so we go together. Both these functions are very difficult for leaders to perform today in the old ways. Because the world is changing so fast, because of the combinations of various forces, not just material and communications forces, but social political forces than before, it's not as easy anymore to predict what things are going to be like 10 or 15 years from today as it used to be just 50 years ago. If you think back even 5 years ago and read the newspapers then, just to remind yourself what people and all our thinkers and economists were saying is going to be happening in 10 years or 15 years. In 5 years, it was proven wrong. If you go back 20 years, the same story. This used to be not that true 50, 100 years ago. I mean, unexpected things used to happen, but things didn't change so frequently or unexpectedly